Earlier today, Stalker 2 got its first major update. This is patch 1.01, a 10GB download on GOG and a similar size on Steam and Xbox. This patch was massive. 650 bugs were fixed, and what may come as a surprise to many is that the patch also included a large number of balance and quality of life changes. So many aspects of Stalker 2 are now easier and in turn more enjoyable for a lot of players. But it's definitely not perfect. Not everything was fixed, and later on in this video we'll highlight some of the frustrating bugs that definitely do remain. And if you're interested in more Stalker 2 content, get subscribed. I'm going to continue to break down every update that comes to this game, as well as I have a mod video, a secret feature video, and even an upcoming mod video on the way. One huge change for those playing with a controller is an increase to gamepad dead zones. This seems like it was just a value tweak and definitely isn't a full-on dead zone setting that still isn't here, but hopefully is still coming at some point in the future. But yeah, aiming with a controller is now far more bearable in Stalker 2. I wouldn't call things perfect after the patch, but it's definitely a major improvement while we wait for a proper dead zone setting. But some of the most impactful changes from this patch were around the game's economy. The change that I think will make just about all of you happy is weapon and armor repair costs were decreased. This is just a flat 30% decrease across the board, which I think is pretty nice. Things aren't cheap to repair now. Repair costs still are a major consideration and probably one of your biggest coupon dumps in the game, but repair costs now actually feel possible to keep up with. Later on, we'll talk about some of the other balance changes from this update, but armor is now just tougher across the board as well. So armor durability was increased by 12.5%, making it so literally every armor in the game will break slower. And the repair pricing being lower is really only one half of this overall economy change. What I would say is the much larger change here is around artifact and some of the quest payouts. Artifacts now sell for a ton more money in Stalker 2, although not across the board, which may be a bit of a mistake or bug in this update. Common artifacts got a giant 60% increase in sale price. That's the largest bump by far, and you'll really feel this one because of course you're most often finding common artifacts. Uncommon artifacts were a bit smaller with a 43% increase, and rare artifacts are the odd ones out here because they only got a 3% increase in value. I even checked several rare artifacts but found the exact same pricing. So I'm not really sure if this is intentional or not. This sequence, which ends with legendary artifacts getting a 16% increase in price, would make a lot of sense with rares getting a nice 30% bump in value. So I do kind of wonder if there's a misplaced decimal or just literally a forgotten zero with the rare artifact pricing, but either way, this is a giant buff to making money in Stalker 2. Artifacts were already one of the best ways to generate consistent income, and this update will just make it so that is significantly more lucrative. Exoskeletons, as well as upgraded weapons, got improved sale prices as well, but the other major change is that nearly all of the missions in the game will now pay out 2 to 3 times as much. So you're literally just going to be making twice or triple the coupons for doing the exact same quest. As a simple example, the Poppy Field quest now gives you 2,000 coupons instead of the 1,000 it previously did. So overall, Stalker 2 economy will be a lot easier to deal with, and you won't be constantly struggling to survive financially. And even though the update's only been out for a few hours, you're going to pretty quickly start to feel this one. Basically, all of the main ways you make money in Stalker 2 are now more profitable. You'll probably make about double the money per hour. And this becomes quite fun because you have a lot more flexibility with what you could spend money on. You could actually now afford to repair your equipment, so you could start venturing out and actually buying other things from vendors now. But some of Stalker 2's combat also got a lot easier. GSC made the easiest difficulty in Stalker 2 even easier. So now, on rookie difficulty, both your armor and weapons are stronger, as in your armor protects you better and your weapons deal more damage. No precise stat changes were mentioned for this one, and it more just seems like a flat damage curve change while playing on the rookie difficulty, and this makes a pretty big difference. This gameplay here is on Stalker difficulty, and while yeah, I could take quite a few shots because I'm wearing strong armor, I pretty quickly still need to stop and heal. Conversely, on this new updated rookie, I can stand here for what feels like all day, and enemies' weapons almost feel like a joke against my armor. This is a pretty substantial buff to armor, and it even goes beyond that. Damage from mutants is moderately decreased on rookie difficulty as well, so mutants will just be less effective against you. Your weapons will break 23% slower, and overall, while you're playing on rookie, things do feel different now. The combat challenge is just notably reduced compared to Stalker or Veteran, and I personally don't hate this change. If you just want to experience the Stalker world without some of the harder gameplay, this mode now does a much better job at delivering that type of experience. And beyond some of the rookie-specific changes, there was also a variety of nerfs that really just make all of the difficulties in Stalker 2 easier, particularly around combat with mutants. Nearly every mutant in the game had their HP reduced, and this is a huge change. Lots of mutants can now be taken down with just a couple of well-placed shots. And honestly, in a lot of instances, you don't even have to be that accurate with your shots. The mutants are just dying much quicker now, making them not nearly as large of an ammo dump. Currently in Stalker 2, mutants are really just there to make you waste resources. There's no actual point to fighting these guys pretty much ever. So while this update does make the hard game easier, which some obviously won't like, I think due to the fact that there's a general pointlessness to fighting mutants, it makes me not really mind this change. It certainly reduced my frustration while playing. And speaking of frustration, this also applies to the infamous Bloodsuckers as well. Bloodsuckers were nerfed across the board, but fit much better into the glass cannon role. Bloodsuckers got their damage nerfed. They're still going to be very tough and deal a lot of damage, but not quite as much. And the larger change will be around how much damage they take, as now Bloodsuckers will take more damage from guns and have less HP regeneration when outside of combat. So yeah, this is just a flat nerf to Bloodsuckers. They are just easier to deal with than they were previously. They're still definitely a threat. I wouldn't say overall it's easy, but some of that insane difficulty and just the amount of resources you'd have to use is mostly gone now. Those are some of the biggest balance changes from this patch, but GSC has been paying attention, and even some of the secondary or more minor complaints around the game did get reworked a bit, as a ton of smaller quality of life tweaks were also made. Scanners, as well as many quest items, are now lighter. This was a direct response to some of the complaints over being over-encumbered right in the middle of a quest because of whatever quest item you got, and now the Hercules consumable will increase carrying capacity, so if you could find these, they'll give you a nice bonus. Knife and weapon bash distance was increased, so it'll be even easier to land knife attacks or open boxes. Lots of players complained that towards the end of Stalker 2, it wasn't super obvious when you hit the point of no return, so with this update, they made it so it's much more clear on your HUD and you could make that final save game. And if you turned on NVIDIA Reflex Low Latency, it was constantly getting turned off due to a bug. Thankfully that was resolved, so make sure you turn it back on. There's also a wide range of bug fixes implemented with this update. A really big one is a lot of those flickering issues were resolved. I had these all throughout my game and pretty much in every zone, but it seems to be almost completely absent now. Performance overall was pretty similar for me before and after the update, but there were some specific memory leak and exception access violation issues that were resolved. These were leading to worse performance in specific circumstances, and the devs describe how over 100 crashes were also resolved with this update. So it's one of those situations where the baseline performance day-to-day FPS is relatively similar, at least for me on my system, but some of the major performance problems that could pop up during quests or in certain events were fixed. So those performance dips aren't there nearly as often, as well as you should be crashing a lot less often. Although this isn't across the board, as some of the initial reports coming out of PC players do cite more crashes after the update, and I would love to hear from you guys down below. How is performance and crashing overall in Stalker 2 after patch 1.01? Are you noticing things are better, or are you sharing the experience of some others where you're actually having a bit more problems now? There were a ton of general bug fixes beyond that, including several around NPCs and even AI. Those NPCs that would go flying right after being killed are now gone. This will likely live on as one of those launch bugs that we always look back on. They fixed a bug where NPCs could track you through cover and then just fire at cover next to you, thinking they could hit you but never actually hitting you, as well as 20 additional AI issues were fixed, but they don't actually specify what those were. They resolved the issue where NPCs would get stuck and just be missing from quest locations, making it much harder to progress quests because you had to go on a scavenger hunt to find that missing NPC. But that was really it on the NPC side. The update did not contain any changes around A-Life, and the spawning problems are still here. I saw an enemy literally spawn right in front of me right after downloading this patch. Although in fairness to GSC, they made it clear that this update wouldn't be addressing some of those problems. The A-Life stuff is still a priority problem for GSC, but it seems like it'll take several more updates for those things to start getting resolved. Beyond that, there were a ton of fixes around quest blockers, with a particular focus on some of the circa and late game quest issues getting resolved. This is big. Stalker 2 has major issues with bugginess once you hit a certain phase of the story, and some of these fixes do make a notable difference in reducing bugs during that period, but sadly it definitely doesn't hit all of them. Several mid to late game quests still have progress blocking bugs after this update, including some of the most widely reported problems. That being with some of the defense missions you get towards the end of the game. I don't want to go too in detail here because there are spoilers involved, but it just seems like with some of these quests they have multiple progress blocking issues, so So while yes, this update did address some of them, that doesn't mean they're fixed, because some of those other issues are still there. This update was really more GSC chipping away at some of these problems, and sadly, they still aren't fully resolved. The initial perception to the patch has been overwhelmingly positive, outside of some obvious frustrations from Xbox and Microsoft PC users who didn't have the update for a while. It literally just dropped on those platforms about 7 hours after releasing on GOG and Steam. But beyond that, this patch was shockingly large. I expected the bug fixes, but frankly thought it would be much lighter on balance and overall quality of life fixes. Playing with the updated game, things are definitely different. Money is just more abundant now, and I honestly wonder if they overdid things and will have to nerf some of the payouts in the future. Making money is a lot easier, and overall, after this update, I would say Stalker 2 as a whole is a bit easier. My initial impressions are that this will be fine. It took those aspects of the game that were frustratingly difficult and toned them down to just being somewhat difficult, which I think is a good change, but I do imagine some subsets of the community will not be as happy with this, with the game overall becoming a bit easier to play. Although of course time will tell. We need further updates and we'll likely see further balance changes, so things will continue to evolve. Although things will be changing somewhat after this initial patch. We have heard how we'd get a larger initial update, but then GSC Game World will be switching to more frequent and smaller hotfixes. And even in the patch notes from today, they do make it clear the work on the game and future patches continues. We are working on fixing the A-Life bugs, which will be addressed in future patches. But they're off to a great start, and if you do want to keep up to date with all of these future updates and even some cool mods to download, get subscribed.